Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name's James Hunt from FeedsEye, and I'm joined by Tom Pilling. Tom, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, James. Yeah, nice to see you again. Tom Pilling, the Chief Risk Officer for the acquiring business at Trust Payments.
Just to dive kind of straight in, I've noticed that you're kind of wearing a bit of a festive jumper there. So what's the background on that? Why don't
Well,
you give the audience a bit more intel?
yeah, I thought, we're getting to the festive season. We're coming up to Christmas. And I thought, yes, why not get into the spirit of it? It is obviously a time of joy and, spending time with family, etc. But it's also a very, challenging time, particularly from a financial crime perspective. We do see obviously an increase in fraud during the festive period, particularly where we've got Black Friday deals coming up. Sometimes is it too good to be true? We do see a lot of fraudulent merchants that appear during this particular time. But obviously, we see hundreds of thousands of genuine businesses that are looking essentially to manage a huge increase in orders that is expected, during this busy period. And what we want to try to do is obviously help as an acquirer and as FeedSeye as a fraud solution provider, is to have that fine balance with regards to managing fraud, but also ensuring that good transactions are going through. And it's about thinking about your own strategy as a business as well, perhaps even sort of reflecting on your own position last year. Did you have, as a merchant, have you many chargebacks or fraud? Were there cases where potentially, there was some, serious money lost through potential chargebacks or actual chargebacks? So it's about having a strategy during the coming weeks. It's about working with your payments company that you use, your acquirer, who will have perhaps sort of out of the box rule settings that come in place during this period, but also maybe, being a bit more clever, shall we say, around the type of fraud rules that you have in place. Those that you perhaps saw a trend happening last year, often we'll see those trends happening again. And therefore, you're having perhaps those, bespoke type rules or velocity type rules that can help in real time, or perhaps next day, if you're looking maybe sort of a 24, 48-hour shipping period, to manage those risks accordingly. But it's about having a bit of a strategy. It's about communicating with your payments company to get the best approach during this busy period, where ultimately you want to have the right strategy in place to protect your business, but also to ensure that your customers are getting their orders in an efficient manner. And I don't know sort of whether James, whether perhaps FeedSeye have got a similar type thought.
If I look back at some of my, I guess, career and especially working in the merchant space, I think that the important point that you hit on there, Tom, is that it's really about that balance of being able to one kind of cope with the volume of traffic you're going to see during kind of this festive season, which now starts at kind of preceding Black Friday, right? I've already had loads of kind of emails around Cyber Month. I mean, I never even knew Cyber Month was a thing, but yeah, we now have the likes of kind of Cyber Month and Black Friday and things like that in the UK. So really kind of most people start with their Black Friday deals early. We see a massive kind of influx of orders, and teams businesses are expected to kind of deal with that influx, which then kind of really kind of creates the opportunity for fraudsters to try and exploit, right? So then I guess that kind of brings me on to that kind of second balancing act, which you kind of mentioned, which is really trying to understand kind of the fraud trends and the patterns, because you kind of need to do that without kind of alleviating or alleviating is the wrong word, maybe impacting kind of your genuine customers. And I think the more time I've spent around e-commerce, kind of the more consumer expectations change as well, right? So I think consumers are maybe a lot more demanding and expect kind of instant gratification somewhat these days. So we mentioned about kind of like same day, next day delivery methods are kind of the norm now, right? To be honest, if I can't order something, and get it kind of next day, then I generally don't order it at all. Maybe because I'm a grumpy old man, but but if we kind of go through and look at that, like that definitely makes kind of fraud prevention a lot harder, because it will definitely mean that kind of more and more fraudsters will kind of fall into some of that kind of what I perceived as genuine traffic. So for me, I think that ability to be able to go through and look and understand not just kind of where you've previously lost money. We know that fraudsters are creatures of habit, right? So like you mentioned, they're going to repeat the same things over and over again. If it's successful, they continue to do it until they have to kind of change their tactics. But ultimately, kind of understanding how that genuine consumer behavior is within the ecosystem as well, right? Like, so for example, is it the grandma that's maybe ordering for 4 different grandkids all over the UK or maybe internationally, right? Historically, she may have only placed an order once or twice a year. Like, it would probably be going to her billing address because she sat there at home, and now suddenly she's ordering 4 PlayStation 5s. I was going to say Xbox then, but I'm not an Xbox fan. I'm a PlayStation guy. Don't know why that came up. But anyway, is she could order kind of 4 PlayStation 5s to each of the grandkids to 2 different addresses. Like so it's about trying to understand kind of that genuine behavior, and then that kind of puts more increased pressure on the operational teams that have to deal with this too, right? So I guess the ability to kind of refine rule sets without kind of increasing risk and without kind of increasing review volumes, especially for those kind of businesses that have some type of manual review or intervention process, is going to be incredibly important during this kind of this time. So maybe we can look at kind of, or deep dive into some of the strategies that kind of merchants and businesses can kind of deploy through fraud, through, I guess, their fraud solutions, or maybe by working with their acquirers. So Tom, what's kind of like your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think each merchant is different. Each vertical is very different as well. Obviously we expect to see a big increase in respect to the digital space and Christmas spend with regards to digital merchants. So in that type of environment, it's very sort of a quick approach to transactions. It perhaps is a fairly relaxed approach, shall we say, to fraud strategy and fraud prevention. But it's where that you've got your merchants that are selling high ticket items. Perhaps we talk about the PlayStations, the Xboxes. Which would obviously clearly be a popular stocking filler for this Christmas. For that is where it's really key to have fraud rules in place that help you to prevent fraud from happening up front, but also allowing those transactions to go through as well. I think, having a strategy, I think, is very key. I think having that relationship with your acquirer is very key. It's also about understanding, I think, the data as well. Any good payments company will be able to give you, relevant information, relevant data that helps you to understand perhaps where your strategies lie, where you should perhaps be tightening or strengthening some of the fraud and the risk rules to have into such a position where you can actually, let it all work in the background without it interfering with the operational elements of the business. It's really key that the business is functioning operationally in a really fluent manner. And if perhaps you're taking operational staff out of the equation to perhaps dealing with fraud issues, then you're then perhaps not dealing with what you should be dealing with, i.e. getting your orders out as quickly as possible. So I think it's really vital that that you've got that strategy in place. You're speaking to your payments company and acquirer to understand where perhaps you've got some weaknesses, where you need to strengthen up to manage your rules accordingly. So I think that's really key. I think as well, what we've started to see in the whole industry, particularly in the summer, is that we've seen a band called Oasis has reformed during the summer. Now, I know them from originally around with the Britpop era in the 90s. But what's been really interesting, obviously, we saw a huge influx of scams now coming into play again. And I think it would be, I don't, James, want you to, don't look back in anger now on this one, and little by little, and I want you to feel supersonic about this question that I'm going to ask you. But I think there's a lot of the old type scams, so ticketing scams. I know a lot of people will be, from a consumer perspective, be looking to maybe sort of purchase from different websites to maybe get friends, family, relatives, boyfriends, girlfriends a ticket for an Oasis concert next year, which I know is sort of the hot ticket, shall we say, to purchase. But you're going to see a lot of scams happening around that, and I know from my perspective, a cardholder perspective, I'm going to have my own thoughts and the type of websites that I'd like to make those purchases from. But there's going to be people out there who think, oh, it'd be a great present to get a grandkid or a son or a daughter, etc. What strategies should people think about when they're trying to avoid scams?
Yeah. Look, I think that's a really pertinent point right now, right? I think especially, and we're probably digressing maybe outside of kind of like the traditional kind of acquiring and kind of merchant kind of ecosystem with some of this, but we're seeing a massive rise in APP fraud, right? And
Sure.
these types of occurrences with things like Oasis kind of selling new concerts, and I'm trying to think of a Champagne Supernova plug, but I just can't right now. So maybe that will come to me back at the end. I like the puns you threw in earlier, but look, I think it's really pertinent. I think it's a real challenge. I think one of the best things we can kind of do as an industry is education, because I think there's
Yep.
so many different mechanisms right now for the facilitation of these types of scams, right? Whether it be a marketplace on a social media site, whether it be more traditional kind of social media channels, I actually recently had a friend of a friend's account got hacked and offered two Oasis tickets because they now could no longer attend, which unfortunately a few people fell for, right? And it wasn't until that happened and maybe the banks intervened to stop the processing of those funds that really anyone realized. So it's definitely a challenge. I think education is definitely going to be the key one here. I think banks are definitely doing a lot more now. We've seen changes in regulation as well with regards to APP fraud, to try and help protect consumers. But really, we kind of need to stop it from happening. I guess if I look at it more specifically, kind of in our context and kind of in a merchant and in kind of an inquiring in an acquiring kind of context, then you know the biggest risk here is going to be kind of resale ticketing
Yep.
sites, right? And the ability to be able to maybe stop some of those scammers from being able to advertise kind of the products in the first place. Now, one of the kind of evolutions I think for AI and machine learning that can really kind of help in that area with regards to kind of like natural language processing, right, for text analysis. One of the things that I feel was really predictive in combating kind of marketplace scams or let's call them classified scams kind of back early in my career was really the actual adverts themselves, right?
Yep.
There's normally we mentioned, or I mentioned earlier, like fraudsters are creatures of habit. There's generally always a specific tone or a specific way that some of these adverts are actually worded. So previously or historically, this has really been around more kind of human intervention and relying on humans to try and spot some of these kind of these particular patterns and trends. Whereas now actually machine learning has come on, so machine learning and AI has come on kind of so far that in actual fact we can use machines to do we can use these kind of technologies to do a lot of this stuff for us, which I think is great. So I think really being able to try and stop some of these adverts and using kind of the right technologies in place is kind of key. But that's kind of my very narrow vision view of the world, Tom. I mean,
Yeah.
what do you kind of have anything else, any other kind of thoughts and comments in that kind of
Yeah,
area?
yeah. I mean, actually, I read a report this morning from Finextra, and they said this morning a survey completed by NatWest, the UK high street bank, indicated that scams had increased significantly, and actually 42% of the adult population in the UK had some exposure to a scam, not necessarily been scammed, but had some exposure to it. And the average scam that where there is an individual has actually been scammed themselves is £700 per case, and that's increasing year on year. So we are starting to see, that there is, as you say, there has been a lot more regulation in the background. There has been an element of protecting cardholders, but in the same vein, there is also an increase that it keeps on happening year on year, where we are starting to see the amount of money that people are losing is increasing year on year. We're also, to your point around social media, a lot of young people as well are falling for these types of scams. I do expect, we've seen obviously over the recent US presidential election, Bitcoin again is really on the increase. And on the back of that, we've seen some reports in the last few days in November, where there's been a huge increase in Bitcoin scams as well. Potentially, AI, you talked about, James, and that's really interesting because you've seen a lot of scams happening with regards to perhaps celebrities and celebrity fake endorsements, shall we say, to jump on the latest cryptocurrency or to jump on Bitcoin because it's expected that it will go to $100,000 for a Bitcoin fairly soon. It just peaked at 90,000 earlier today, but I think with the presidential election that happened, it's certainly continuing to increase. People are looking to invest, and perhaps people aren't always, to your education point, fully aware of where they should be investing. And that's where scammers are getting ahead. They're getting one step ahead, where they're jumping on perhaps the latest trend, the latest perhaps celebrity endorsement that isn't quite a celebrity endorsement, it is fake. And I think we're seeing that perhaps people are thinking, well, I need to make a little bit more money for myself, my family, or this celebrity's endorsing this particular cryptocurrency, I'll jump on that. I think subsequently, it's losing a lot of money as well. So I think what we do is, as a general rules, we're speaking, about merchants, we're speaking about card holders and customers themselves as well. We look at supporting merchants in the best way that they can to stop fraud happening to themselves, and often a lot of companies are perhaps using KYC, know your customer type technology to identify, is that actually the real person that is supposedly the customer. So there's a lot of things that customers and companies can do to help protect them. But I think it's still very frightening to see how much people are getting scammed still. I think, going back to the ticketing, we'll expect to see a significant increase in people trying to sell tickets for concerts next year. And I think that probably the best one I saw was someone had written out on a bit of paper and what times one Oasis ticket for Edinburgh next June, and that was all that this person had to show as evidence that actually they'd got any tickets at all. And people were still desperate for the ticket, desperate to give it out as a present, and they'll pay the money, they'll hand over the money. And you've often just, from your educational side of things, you've just got to sometimes, right, let me take a step back, let me just see, is this too good to be true, as we talked about? And often if it is too good to be true, generally it's fraudulent or it's a scam. So it's great that you're going to get a bargain, or it's great that you're going to get something perhaps ahead of somebody else. But always we urge people, just have a think before you make that purchase. Does it look genuine? Does it look real? Is it perhaps been fake endorsed? That can just give you that just extra time just to make a decision that ultimately could save you some money in the long run as well.
Yeah, and I think that motto, like, is it too good to be true, was something that was kind of drummed into me kind of at an early age of my fraud prevention career, right? Like it was kind of like 101 of fraud prevention at any point. If someone's trying to order 50 widescreen TVs from your website, it's probably a little suspect kind of situation. The sales hands, the sales guys obviously rub their hands with glee. The fraud prevention guys are like, hang on a minute, like 50? Like, do we even have 50 to sell, right? So yeah, I think that's a really important point. being drummed into us kind of like was too good to be true, right? Now, I also think the other thing that I also try and do, I guess, just looping back to kind of some of the initial conversations around kind of like peak season and what should businesses, merchants, especially in the smaller space, do is like always try and put yourself in the customer's shoes, I guess, is kind of another way I'd look at it. So one, is it too good to be true, aka kind of, as I mentioned, as someone trying to order kind of like 50 widescreen TVs. And I think that's going to be more important when we talk about kind of ticketing and scams and Oasis. Like, is James trying to sell Tom 2 Oasis tickets for £50 each? It's probably going to be a bit dodgy, not just because I'm dodgy, but Tom's also wearing an Ipswich Town jumper. But then also, like, if it doesn't seem too good to be true and stuff like that, does the customer seem genuine? Like, is what they're physically asking for, is where you're sending the goods, does it make logical sense? If it's going to be a shady back street somewhere which you've been able to check out on Google Maps, it's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to be a bad transaction. But being able to kind of do that thing as well.
So I think, from my perspective, I think it's very much around understanding sort of where your own risks lie. Understanding what measures that you can implement. I think from my perspective as well, I want to think about perhaps next year, James. So you're at your Christmas, you're having your Christmas dinner on Christmas Day. You luckily get the turkey wishbone, and you make a wish for 2025 in respect of financial crime. What would be your wish for 2025 in reducing financial crime?
What would be? That's a really good. No one's ever asked me a question like that before, so I feel really unprepared. So what would be my wish for fraud and financial crime?
Well, let me go first, James. I'll go first.
Go on,
you have a think about it. And so once I've got the wishbone on Christmas Day, I think for me it's about collaboration. I think we're starting to get there. We're starting to see regulators, acquirers, companies such as yourself from FeedZai, card schemes working much more together as organisations to help reduce financial crime. It's going really well, but it needs to continue. That whole collaboration piece needs to be a lot stronger. I think there's so many different parties that are involved in the process end to end, that perhaps as organisations, as regulators, as card schemes, as acquirers, we're perhaps not always bringing that message together. Ultimately it's about trying to protect the consumer. And I think we're starting to see a lot more regulation this year happening. Sometimes it doesn't always work in favour of certain elements or certain jigsaw pieces along the way, to certain companies that are involved in the whole end-to-end flow. But I do think that we're starting to get there. And I think my wish, 2025, we're a quarter of a way through this century already, which is scary. But I think we're starting to see a bit more collaboration. We're starting to get that messaging across, which is key. And to your point earlier, James, the education, but it's how we take it 1, 2, 3 steps further to keep improving the process, keep collaborating to ensure that we can protect consumers and also protect merchants as well. That's really key. It perhaps is always not thought about. It's always about protecting the consumer. But we've got to think about companies that are trying to do business day to day. It's really important that they are protected as well as organisations. I've seen over the years too many companies that have gone under purely because of chargebacks. And it's how you protect your own organisation is key. It's how we educate those merchants is key. But it's also about helping to protect each other, shall we say, in avoiding scams and trying to be one step ahead in the future. And I think that's my wishes for 2025. It's that collaboration piece. I mean, what about yourself, James? What are you hoping for in 2025?
Yeah, look, I'm actually going to jump on that collaboration piece, right? Because I think also that's something that's kind of very dear to my heart. I kind of feel that I'm very fortunate here at FeedZai that I get to work with not just people like you, Tom, but I also get to work with people kind of on more kind of traditional banking routes, right? So on the issuing side of the house as well. And I can't help but feel with some of that visibility that I get that we kind of view things from two very different ways. And it's the same ecosystem. It's technically the same data. We have different data points, which I think we can maybe share, collaborate, and innovate on together in order to, like, if we truly wanted to kind of eradicate kind of fraud and financial crime as much as we can, our caveat with as much as we can, I think that collaboration is key. I mean, and again, I think both of us have kind of grown up in an industry where we know that fraudsters collaborate on a day-to-day basis, right? There's forums, like they're not confined or bound by let's say regulation, right? Like we potentially are as industries, either on the banking or kind of the acquiring side. And there's always kind of that constant kind of data share of tips, hints, tricks, kind of which websites are weaker, which maybe banks are easier to kind of get certain different types of cards from, maybe account takeover and things like that. And I think being able to kind of draw on those resources together, and being able to kind of collaborate and kind of drive towards the ecosystem, look, wouldn't just really drive down fraud and financial crime, but would actually also help increase conversion, right? Because we know that that's another kind of big bugbear, for especially within the merchant space. And there are a couple. And kudos to them. There's at least one company I can think of which is trying to kind of fill that gap right now, and fair play. And I kind of wish them all the best and success for 2025 as well, because I really do think there's something there, and being able to kind of we talk about asking our clients or our merchants or whoever else to kind of use the data that's available to them, but there's a whole host of data out there in the ecosystem which we could probably bring together for the greater good of what we're trying to achieve.
I've just got a sort of couple of final thoughts that I thought would be worth sharing. I think we talked a lot today about collaboration being the key. I think there are many moving parts to the payments ecosystem. It's about ensuring that we're collaborating together as organisations to understand where the risks are. As I said earlier, it's scary to think that the average value of a scam these days is £700, and that's increasing. And we've got to look at ways of how we can all work together to reduce these levels of crime. That's what it is at the end of the day. It's a criminal offence where scammers are getting away, and it's how we protect each other, I think, is really, really important. It's vital that, from a merchant perspective, a business perspective, that you're talking to your acquirer. I think a lot of merchants are often perhaps frightened to talk about fraud, that you shouldn't. You should be talking to your acquirer, your payments company, about how to avoid fraud. If you've had a particular situation with a chargeback, every single acquirer has a chargeback team. Speak to that chargeback team to understand what you perhaps could do better. If it's perhaps a delivery issue or it's a service issue, sometimes there are ways to help protect yourself from chargebacks or to defend the chargeback as well. So it isn't just the fraud piece, it is actually the chargeback piece as well that you should have those conversations. And the what I would always say to merchants is to speak to your acquirer, speak to your payments company, be educated from them, understand how you can protect your business. And I don't know, James, if you've got some final thoughts as well.
I mean, other than working on my Oasis puns, perhaps. Look. I think you've kind of summarized kind of really nicely there, Tom. I don't think there's really kind of much else to add. I mean, other than maybe just speaking to like if you use a fraud prevention vendor, speak to your vendor. Right? I love talking to Tom. I love talking to Tom's team. I think we kind of learn a lot together, not just about kind of how they use our system, but just generally what we're seeing in the ecosystem. So the way that I kind of view it is like your fraud prevention provider isn't just your vendor, they're your partner. And if you're successful, they're successful. So don't be afraid to kind of reach out, ask them for their thoughts, comments, suggestions, help in certain things, as well as kind of reaching out to kind of your acquirer, as Tom mentioned, and chargeback teams, etc. as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, really, really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you have a great Christmas and a happy new year. And I look forward to a prosperous 2025 with you.
And the collaboration with Fido will be great, and we look forward to that again, James. So best wishes for Christmas and Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year.